For many teenagers, puberty is a difficult time. But for transgender kids, like Chris Mari, it can be absolutely frightening.
I was having trouble going to school because that's where I was really depressed about not being able to be a boy.
The growing unease over being a boy in a girl's body soon became too much for Chris to handle.
He had a lot of anxiety, he had a lot of fear, he had, just a lot of intense feelings about it.
So intense that Karina started to teach Chris at home, where he could be who he was, neither boy nor girl. But one semester of homeschooling was enough for Chris.
He said to me that he would rather go to school than be homeschooled, and he'd rather be dead than go to school as a girl. I saw my job as helping my kids to figure out who they were and helping them to become who they saw themselves as. And it kind of felt like my theory of being that kind of mother was really being tested, and I didn't have a clue what to do.
Karina had to make a decision that would fundamentally affect the rest of her child's life. The choice was excruciating but unavoidable. After consulting their doctor, Karina decided to let her child take a huge step out of gender limbo and be a boy. She even made it a cause for celebration.
On my 12th birthday, we had a transition party.
So I made a cake, and half of the cake said "Happy Birthday, Julia," and then the other part said "Happy Transition Day, Chris." I had written up a certificate stating that he would be referred to as a he by all those who loved him.
Everyone walked in, it's like, "Bye, Julia," call me my old name, and, then everyone walked out, bye, Chris," so it was pretty cool.
But transitioning would not be that clear-cut. Chris couldn't just declare himself a boy, so Karina decided to send him to a school where the kids would not know Chris was born Julia.
We met with the principal, the guidance counselor, and, the key support staff in the school. All of the teachers that were directly working with Chris would know, but nobody else would.
But even with all the careful planning, the class list still said Julia.
Well, since my name hadn't officially been changed, I was nervous about, the teachers calling me, the wrong name.
And of course, that happened.
I, hopped out of my seat. I'm like, yeah, that's the wrong name. It's supposed to be Chris. It's like, oh, okay.
Chris was successfully transitioning socially, but that could not change his body. It kept developing like a woman's. Chris needed medication to block the production of the female hormone estrogen. This put Karina in a quandary.
It was a gamble. It's a gamble to put a child on medication, but it was just as much a gamble not to put my child on medication and take the chance that my child would commit suicide.
Although research is scarce, some studies have shown that there is an elevated risk of suicidal behavior amongst transgender youth. Karina didn't want her child to be among them. Doctors, however, are reluctant to medicate a healthy 12-year-old. But Karina focused on the benefits of the drugs, while her sister worried about the risks.
The hormones really bother me. I understand the point of them, but she went to so many different doctors, and then you finally find a doctor that says, okay, we're going to do this. They're just so controversial, the drugs.
Doctors were not the only obstacle. Karina's insurance wouldn't cover it because the treatment was considered experimental.
We had to go through an appeals process. 6 months we're working on an appeals process.
Week after week, Chris worried that the medication wouldn't come in time to stop his breast from growing and his period from coming. All he could do was try not to think about it.
Of course, in the back of my mind, there were some worries, but I would push him to the back and not let myself think about it too much.
Chris was starting to feel very panicky. I was starting to feel panicky because of Chris's reaction. His breast started developing a little bit, and he got very uncomfortable with that, and so we took an ace bandage and would bind him.
But hope was not lost. The doctor found a cheaper estrogen blocker, one that included tamoxifen, a common breast cancer medication. At age 12, Chris had officially begun his medical transition. Chris's mentor, Evan Davis, was 49 before he started his physical transition to manhood. Unlike Chris, Evan grew up in shame and fear of being transgender, and it took half a lifetime to gather enough courage to make the big change.
I went to a library conference, and one of the speakers was Leslie Feinberg, who is a transgender author, an activist, who has written books on the topic.
Suddenly, for Evan, a light went on.
It was a feeling maybe there is a way out of this. Maybe I don't have to live the rest of my life this way. It was kind of a feeling of elation. It was like an adrenaline rush. That's how I felt.
It was a critical moment, almost half a century in the making. But it was only the beginning. Now Evan had to reveal the truth about his gender to his boss and friend, Susan Krieger.
Well, I got a phone call from Evan one day about 4 years ago, and he sounded very distraught.
The stakes were high. Evan felt his job was on the line, as was his friendship with Susan.
I was so afraid. I was really scared. Because this is something I'd kept a secret for so many years. I was very afraid of losing my job. That scared me more than anything.
And he said, there's something I need to come to talk to you about. And I just knew from his voice that it was something big. So he came over and he looked terrible. He was very, very nervous, very distraught, pale even.
I thought, I just don't want to cry. That's the one thing I never cry at work. You know, I'm not going to do that. So when I did go over to finally talk to her, the first thing I did was start to cry.
I said, what's wrong? You know, what's wrong?
What I said to her was, I know that you think I'm gay. She was like, right?
And he said, I'm not gay, Susan. I'm a heterosexual male. I was just stunned. I was just totally flabbergasted. I couldn't believe what I was hearing because I wasn't expecting it. I just had to think for a minute, like, what is he telling me? And he said, I'm what you call a transsexual.
She was kind of trying to, process it because it was such a shock to her.
This was someone that I had known for 16 years, and that it changed my perception of this person I thought was a female like me, that I had talked girl talk with, and had made, jokes about hot flashes and things like that.
That night, when she went home and thought about it, she got a little angry at me. Because she even told me the next day, I felt like I was betrayed.
I thought, well, why me? Why do I have to deal with this? This is just so weird. I don't understand any of this. This is so weird. But when you're the boss, you can't just go run and hide under your desk.
So precisely at 9 a.m. one morning, they sent out a joint announcement for the staff.
I'm writing this letter to inform you of a significant change in my life and to ask... Oh, that was a very scary day. Yes, it was. We called it Evangate.
The clock ticked as Evan waited for an explosive reaction to the news.
I will begin living and working full-time as a male.
But no bomb ever went off.
Most people, they just, hugged me, said, it's okay, no problem. I never knew, what you were going through all those years. It was nice.
With Susan's help, Evan became the library's newest male employee, and now things couldn't go fast enough. Only 2 months later, Evan was happy to have surgery to remove his breasts.
I kept waking up and looking in the mirror, and I just kept going like, it's okay now, they're gone. It was such a relief.
Soon he was giving himself injections of the male hormone testosterone. He began to look like a man, and he would now behave like one. It was a whole new life, the one he had always wanted. But making the transition to manhood isn't all about physical changes. The fight for acceptance is crucial, and sometimes painful. Coming up, Chris Maury confronts his father, who he hasn't seen in 8 years.
Chris was upset by his father. He really wanted his father to understand.
I think that he had never seen this coming.